Hello, my scribes of the extraordinary. On today's journey, we are going beyond entertainment and diving deeper into the craft of storytelling by talking about tropes. We'll be talking about tropes, how to avoid cliches, what an archetype is. So, first and foremost, what is a trope? Well, tropes are narrative devices that can be recognized across multiple stories. Essentially, it's something that we see a lot, all the time. Pretty much every story out there has not just one trope, but many tropes. Tropes are common themes or ideas in media. They can be plot devices, types of relationships, or, as I previously mentioned, different themes. And as I said, tropes are in nearly every story. They are tried and true elements that make up a story. Here are a few examples. I'm pretty sure you've heard of these before. Good versus evil. The meet cute from romances. Enemies to lovers. We have a small town with a secret, or a secret society. We have a training montage. We have a love triangle. A MacGuffin. The villain monologue. Found family. First love. Self sacrifice. How many different stories popped into your head as you heard this list? Let me know some of them below. And as I said, tropes are everywhere, but if you try avoiding them, you'll probably just end up using ones that you weren't trying to avoid. Tropes are in every single story out there. They are the reason why we keep coming back to certain stories. Now, think of some of your favorite story ideas, some of your favorite books, movies. Can you think of what are a few things that they have in common? These commonalities are most likely tropes that you enjoy, tropes that you keep going back to. Again, tropes are not a bad thing. Now we can get even more specific and talk about character tropes. And here's a few of them you'll probably recognize. We have the chosen hero, the tragic hero, a damsel in distress, a mentor, the villain, the princess, the sidekick, the wise old sage. We have the nerd or the jock, the reluctant hero, or a reluctant ruler. You get the idea. Character tropes are types of characters that recur in stories. And again, tropes are not a bad thing. Think back to your favorite stories now that you've been thinking about them, and think of all the tropes that you enjoy. We return to certain stories because we like the tropes in them, because we like those elements. That's why there's so many different stories out there and why there's so many different genres, different types of stories within the same genre. Is because everyone comes to a story for a different reason. Now, in a similar vein to tropes, we have a character archetype. Now, character archetypes are recurring character roles that appear in many stories and myths. Each archetype has recognizable patterns to them. How many archetypes are there? That is a great question. I wish I could tell you. And the reason is because it depends on who you ask. Some people swear that there are 12 archetypes. Others say there's 14. But some still say there's 16. Ultimately, there are a bunch of archetypes. Depends on who you ask. But here are some very common examples to get you started. We have the hero, the caregiver, the common person or the everyman, the creator, the explorer. We have the innocent or the child, an outlaw or a rebel, the sage, the lover, the mentor. Now, notice some of these have crossed over with character tropes. And as I said before, they are very similar. So what is the difference between a trope and an archetype? Now, they're very similar, as I mentioned before, but there are some differences that I want you all to be aware of. An archetype is a type of character that we see repeated throughout time. For example, the hero. If you look back at some of the earliest works of literature, you will see the hero archetype show up multiple times. Someone who is protecting their home, someone who's fighting the monsters, fighting the bad guys, someone who has this special quality about them that has them rise above everyone else to protect others. That's the hero archetype. Now, we have that trope hero as well. We see so many stories nowadays about heroes because we find it interesting as a modern audience. But the key difference is tropes are for modern audiences and are culturally specific. So some tropes that we have now didn't exist in centuries past or weren't tropes at that time. So a superhero is not an archetype. A superhero is a trope because a superhero denotes a necessity of cities and bigger metropolitan areas in order to have all these different people to protect. Superheroes also are associated with superhuman abilities. Now, some heroes, if you look back in the past, might be deemed as having a superhuman ability because they're a bit stronger than others, have more stamina than others. But the superhero trope focuses on big cities, grand fights, and having a power. Now, you see the difference between archetype and trope? There are some overlap because of our modern media and because we like what we like. But the difference is tropes are culturally specific and tend to be modern, and archetypes are things that you can see throughout all of history, different types of characters that you can see going throughout time. Now, using tropes or archetypes are a great place to begin when crafting your character. The problem comes when you take your entire character and base it off of this one trope or this one archetype. Now, if you do that, you will end up with stereotypes. Now, we do not want stereotypes. Stereotypes are cliche and but what is the difference between an archetype or a trope and a stereotype? Well, archetypes are inherent patterns, inherent truths that you see reappear in characters over and over again. They're universal patterns of behavior or emotion. Now, think about that. There are certain types of characters that you expect to function a certain way. Take the hero, for example. You expect a hero to see someone in trouble and save them. You expect a hero to see a villain and fight them. You expect a hero to lead the way, to be courageous. These are all a part of the hero archetype. But a stereotype is an oversimplified generalization. It starts as one small, true thing, and it overtakes the entire character with this one element. Now, this one element generalizes an entire character. That leads to cliche and uninteresting and boring characters. Essentially, stereotypes tend to take negative characteristics that could be found in an archetype or a trope and creates an entire character based off of all of these negative traits. And it has a very high potential to be dehumanizing. Archetypes, on the other hand, represent inherent truths found in human nature. There are certain patterns of behavior that we can expect out of certain people. And the important distinction between archetypes and stereotypes is stereotypes, as I said, take all of the negative traits of these patterns and strings them together, where an archetype can take all of the traits, negative and positive, and use them as a springboard to create someone interesting. You can have a hero save the people, beat the bad guys, save the day. But is the hero more focused on saving the person because he knows the person? Is the hero focused on saving the person because he can get a lot of money out of them? Is the hero more focused on beating up the bad guy because he wants to win? Is the hero more focused on beating up the bad guy because then he'll get fame? These are all ideas that stem from the archetype hero. They're all still fighting the bad guys. They're all still saving the people. But there's different motivations behind them. How do you keep an archetype from becoming a stereotype? It's super simple. Just be creative and add depth. Don't take the first thing that comes to mind. In fact, probably don't take the first few ideas that come to mind. Our brains tend to be very lazy. And when you ask it to do something, say like, oh yeah, I want to write a hero. It's going to be like, okay, heroes are courageous and they lead a group and they carry a big sword and they fight the monsters. How many different characters can you think that fit all of those descriptions? But keep asking yourself these questions. Keep going deeper of, oh, I don't want to do that for my character. Or even if you like those tropes of the hero trope, dig deeper. Why does he do this? Why does she want that? Depth is what defeats stereotype. Be creative. Add depth to your character's personality and realism. Not only will you thank yourself, your audience will thank you too for creating deep and interesting characters. As I mentioned before, stereotypes are one oversimplified idea that generalizes the entire character. Depth is the enemy of stereotypes. Now let's take a look at one of my favorite characters, and that is Hiccup from the How to Train Your Dragons films. We're going to talk specifically in the first film. Now, Hiccup fits the stereotype of the weak nerd, maybe even socially inept geek. But does he really? I mean, you could qualify him as a nerd because he's very intelligent and very crafty with his intelligence and creates things. But he uses his cleverness to overcome any lack in physical ability or agility or strength. He isn't socially inept either. It's not like he's hiding in the corner because he sees a group of people and goes, I don't know how to talk to them. No, he's the son of the chief. He's been around everyone his entire life. He knows them well enough. He gives you a description of all the other teens in the village at the very beginning. He's not socially inept. He just is a little bit different, so he tends to keep to himself. But he can talk to anybody in the village. He isn't shy at all. Because Hiccup is multifaceted, he's really hard to pin a stereotype onto. And that's what I want you to take out of this. Depth defeats stereotypes. You yourself are multifaceted. You are a culmination of beliefs and your history and all the experiences you've been through and how you're wired to think. You are multifaceted. You are interesting. Add those things to your characters. Make them interesting. Make them multifaceted. These are the things that will make people fall in love with your characters. So, question of the week. What is your favorite trope and how have you incorporated it into your writing? What are those tropes that just draw you into a story that you really love? One of mine is the reluctant ruler, and I'm currently incorporating that into a fantasy trilogy. Tell me about your favorite tropes down below. I'd love to read through the comments and see what you all really enjoy. But my scribes of the extraordinary, that is all that I have for you today. I look forward to our next encounter as we continue going beyond entertainment, one step at a time.